from the book of Second Chronicles 19:5, which says, "And he said to them, always think carefully before pronouncing judgment. Remember that you do not judge to please people, but to please the Lord. He will be with you when you render the verdict in each case." And today I'm just grateful for life, health, strength, grateful for my wife and my children and each and every one of you, my staff. It's just so much to be grateful for. Um, this particular verse, well, one of the reasons why I shared this verse is I listened to this story on a Facebook or a TikTok reel last night, and it was this story about this man and his wife. So his wife would always, he wasn't a non-Christian man, but he just never used to go to church. And his wife keep begging him to go to church, keep begging him to go to church. And he finally decided to visit church with her. And when he was in church, his cell phone rang. And when his cell phone rang, everyone in church turned around at him and like looked at him in disgust and everything. And after church, the pastor came to him and was like, "Oh man, you couldn't turn your phone off during the sermon," and like basically chastised him for it. So the man left church, feeling kind of overwhelmed. And he went to a bar. And when he went to this bar, he dropped the glass and the glass broke. And the guy jumped next to him who was sitting with his wife or girlfriend, jumped up and was like, "Hey man," he's like, don't worry about it. It was an accident, and the the hostess came and she brought up a broom and she swept it up, and the guy wanted to help and she's like, "No, you don't have to help. It was an accident." And so the bartender came up to him and was like, "No, man, it's an accident. Things happen." And the bartender bought him a beer, and the other guy offered him drinks for the rest of the night. Well, at the end of the story, the guy never went back to church but started to go to the bar. And that was a powerful reminder to me about judgment, right? And about the way that we look at things as Christians and treat people in the church. And this particular verse sort of resonated to that. And, it was just one of those reminders to me that as we go into this week, that we must always keep such a clear conscience when we're dealing with people, and be reminded that as Christians, forgiveness is something that God has gifted us with, right? And it's one of those things that we have to, like, we have to extend our grace and our mercy the same way God has extended it to us. So we must always think about others and when they may be in certain situations, and instead of us judging them, if we see somebody who is sinning around us, it isn't about us to judge them. It's about us to try to offer them help. It's about us coming and comforting them and letting them see what God has done for us in our lives, and what he could do for them in their lives instead of passing judgment onto them. So that's one of the things that I want to go throughout this week, with all of us inside our heart and thinking about. So thank you again for the opportunity to speak. I traveled this morning, so just keep me and my wife in your prayers as we travel. And again, thank you for just giving me the opportunity to speak. And I'm Kerry, and I pass the mic back to our moderator.